Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave, and I'm joined here with my co host. His name is Greg. What up, Greg? How are you? You weird
I
looking dude.
am fantastic. Thank you for that. I'm
Just
doing pretty
kidding.
good, man.
I'm in a
Busy,
mood.
busy, busy. Well, yeah, Dave, you're in a good mood?
I don't know. It's just a mood, right?
Remains to be seen. Yeah. That's right. Interesting. We're kind of going to be talking about that a little bit today. I almost decided what your mood was because of the stories that I was telling myself. So,
Oh,
Dave, I gotta be honest. We always talk about books here,
yeah.
like ad nauseum, really. But it's funny because I'm reading two books, and I say reading with quotations because I'm actually listening to them. But I think you would love both of these, and it's gonna really tie into the subject that we're talking about today. And one is James, and the other one is Grendel. So they're actually two books about really famous uh, works of literature. So one's the Grendel one is based on Beowulf, and Beowulf's this great epic story about a hero, and Grendel's the monster. And this story is Grendel's point of view. And it's like Freud's
Okay.
devouring mother and like the way he was treated, the way he was brought up, and how he knows what he knows. It's
Are
like the
you are you reading that in like tribute to Wicked? Because it's like from the Wicked Witch's point of view.
so no, but it's funny, like as I was gonna ask you if you have any other examples of this kind of stuff because I really love it. And James is, Huck Finn, but from Jim.
Oh,
Jim's point of view. So it's
okay.
really cool. It's all very cool. And you know, we understand the concept that there's two sides to every story, right? Everyone knows that. But we don't really live that way at all. I think always in my own life, and I can't really speak for you, Dave, but when I have to figure something out or I'm going to do something, or if I have a big thing coming up, like a new job or something, I always lean towards the negative. And the positive, I think, like if you're leaning towards the worst case scenario, the best case scenario is just as likely. But for whatever reason, we're always leaning negative here. So we talked about in the past about Seven Deadly Sins. We talk about urban legends. We talk about all these stories that impact our lives so much and our behavior, but we fail to sort of mention the most important thing, and that's the stories that we tell ourselves, right?
Yeah. I often will share that with people that like we're just kind of wired to see the negative a lot of times or to
Mm.
to focus in on the negative. And I was sharing that with someone and they took it as like a scientific fact. And I was like, no, I'm kind of just like saying a generalization.
Yeah,
He's like, oh yeah, well, I wonder where that comes in like the brain. And I'm like, no, it's like a generalization. But
yeah.
like for the most part, we tend to like just gravitate towards the negative. But that's that anxiety, right? That's the anxious
Survival.
thinking. Yep.
Yeah, survival.
So, we did a whole episode about cognitive behavioral therapy.
Hmm.
A whole episode.
Big one. Yeah.
It was a whole episode of our lives,
Popular one.
I
It is.
guess. For
It is.
yeah, for some. And I think that we touched on some of the things we're going to talk about today, but I just want people to understand the reason why we're going back and doing this all over again is because we just scratched the surface. We did a few of it, like the ones um, that we felt were prominent. And we're
Hmm.
talking about cognitive distortions, of course, um, which are, Greg, go ahead. You can take a stab at it.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you put me on the spot here. So, a cognition is a thought. I think we can all agree there, right, Dave? I think that's
Yep.
something we're all
Sounds
agreeing
like
there.
it. Yep.
And I love that when like a word really kind of is perfect for a situation. And distortion is a perfect word for this because to distort means to alter or twist. Um, and you know to take something and remove it from its normal original position.
Okay.
So like a thought, you twist and alter it,
Yep.
and it's not what it is anymore, right? It's not just this benign thought anymore. It's something different.
So, Greg, when we were talking about this, one of the ways that I was sharing that I sometimes will explain this cognitive cognitive distortion to people is to pretend that we're looking at life through Instagram. And when we're taking a photo of something in Instagram, we get to the screen where we have the option to add a filter. And think of the cognitive distortions as the different filters. So each one changes the way we view the photo. The photo never changes, only the filter changes. But with each filter change, we can get a different emotion from each, you know, relayed to the photo.
Hmm.
It could be a black and white, could be very dramatic, while a sepia tone might be more vintage vibes, right?
Okay,
So,
yeah, yeah. Even more
um,
romantic, in my opinion.
maybe. And then, you have like your brighter ones that, will make it pop a little bit more. So each filter adds something without changing what we're seeing at all. And that's what our brain does. So when we go down this list of cognitive distortions, which there is a good amount, each of these is like a filter that because the situation's never going to change. And the
No.
thing that I like really try to emphasize to people is we're all going to look at the same exact scenario but feel differently. And as we know from cognitive behavioral therapy, the way you interpret a situation or the way you view it and think about it is going to determine how you feel your emotions.
Yeah, and if you notice that like that, certain thoughts or the way you're looking at things is really kind of getting you down, it's like I always often tell people to sort of become a lawyer for yourself. I think that's the best way to approach these sometimes. Because if you can, you're thinking, oh, this person, looked at me this way, they don't like me, or you mess up once at your job and you're like, man, I should have never really got into this profession or anything like that. And if you can become a lawyer for yourself and kind of look at all different angles of it and try to disprove the the thought that is making you feel like crap, then I think that's always a pretty good approach.
Yeah.
Should we talk about like where these kind of how they were developed, or should we just kind of get into them? I think it's your
So,
call on
why don't you explain a little bit of the history around these cognitive distortions, and maybe that will help give people a better understanding of what these are, where they came from?
that. Okay, so as far as I could gather, there's three really important people when it comes to developing these, filters as you call them, which I think is perfect actually, because you can almost like it's almost like a kaleidoscope. You can put it in front of your eye. And then if you shift it a little bit, that's changing it, and then things look completely different. I think a filter is a great way to put it. But it's Beck, Ellis, and David Burns, right? So Beck we obviously talked quite a bit about him when we talked about CBT and his model. He's coming right after, not right after, but after Freud, and maybe a couple decades after Freud. And he's essentially saying that Freud wants you to look at your thoughts, and psychoanalyst wants you to look at your thoughts and say, like, oh, these are important. What do they mean about you? What do they mean about you? And Beck's kind of like, well, what if they're wrong and they don't mean anything? And that's kind of the approach he's kind of taking. Like, what if like we have these automatic thoughts that are telling us and making us feel a certain way and telling us something about ourselves that's just not true. So that's where he's coming from. And then Ellis comes along. He's actually maybe a contemporary with Beck, sort of the same ideas, but he came up with this ABC method, which I really love. And that's the ABC method, simply put, is something that happens, and then there's a way that you think about it, and then there's a consequence of that. So if I, hear a sound coming down the stairs right now, and I'm like, oh my God, is someone in the house that shouldn't be here, then I feel completely frightened. But I could take that thought and I could change it a little bit. I could be like, "Oh, pizza's here," or something like that. Like or
Ooh, I
like, "Wow,
wonder who this could be.
yeah, exactly, right?" So
Yeah.
like, and you shift that one little thought, and like you're saying before, the action or the event doesn't change at all. It's just the way you think about it and the way you look at that event completely change the way you feel, and not only the way you feel, the way I'm going to react to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's kind of like really, really, really interesting, and that's why it is important to talk about this again. And Beck had this student who we're a fan of. Maybe before more than now, but I'm still a fan of him. And David Burns. David Burns writes a book, Feeling Good, and he takes it to the mainstream. And Beck and Ellis, they didn't have a list of cognitive distortions like he did. He just had this kind of they just both had this idea that like the automatic thoughts were leading people to think negatively. And David Burns comes along and popularizes 10 very specific cognitive distortions. And Burns, it's funny, Dave, because sometimes we talk about how you can't just be one kind of therapist. I suppose that's true unless you're David Burns, because I don't think he's anything but CBT.
Yeah, he's very CBT. Why
Yeah.
did you say maybe not as much of a fan now as before?
Well, I say that because he's kind of closed-minded when I've heard two separate therapists be on his podcast who I kind of really admire. One being Stephen Hayes with ACT, and he ripped Stephen Hayes to shred. And I think for good reason because it was a little too heady. And I will always respect and think David Burns is probably the best CBT. He's like the literally the guru of
Yeah.
CBT for the world right now. I mean, literally coming a student of the creator. But I don't know. Maybe he's a little too close-minded. I don't know. Because
Okay.
CBT, honestly, CBT doesn't work with everyone.
Well, you got to, it depends on the person. See, I don't think that, I don't know that they would say it does either,
Mm,
because if you're not prepared to do the work, then you're not going to be able to do it. So
yeah.
that's obviously always going to be a thing that's, because you have to go in there being ready to do the work if you do it his way, because there's like homework.
Yeah.
It's,
It's like
you
almost
have,
like a contract in the
yeah.
beginning where
Yep.
it's like if you're not, so he's not going to pull someone out of like that person has to really want to change. So I don't know if he's going to help someone who's like manic. I don't know if he's going to help someone with personality disorders
Yeah.
often, like maybe like a borderline. I don't think that's going to work.
But you know what, Greg? Neither of us will ever have to worry about knowing if it works for everyone, because we are not going to use it for everyone, and we are
No.
not ever going to do fast action therapy
And we're
for
never,
the most
yeah,
part.
yeah, like David Burns saying, you got 2 hours because I'll fix your whole life.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, wow, that's
Or
pretty good.
like how many weeks do their session their programs usually run? It's like
Like
a
eight
matter of
max.
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're like 8 years.
How about 8 years? Buckle up.
Yeah.
Let's get to know each other.
I want to talk about that later. So hopefully we'll remember at the end. But yeah, no, I was a big fan of David Burns. I still am. I just have been. I feel like that was like a period of time where we were very excited. And if
Hmm.
anybody has been listening to us for a long time, clearly our excitement shifts over time, and we get excited about other things.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
don't think it's not like on my end. I don't think it's a lack of appreciation for him. It's just more of like there's been other things that have come up that have
Mm.
also caught the attention. Um, so with that being said, though, we can get into this list. I will just say that when you hear this list, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, I do that one. Oh, yeah, I do that one too. Oh, wait, I do all of these. And guess what? Most of us do. Or you might say, I do like 8 out of 10, or I do 5 out of 10. That's totally common. Nobody does just one. That is not the way this works. And that's not the purpose of this. And the purpose isn't really even to keep count. It's more just about understanding yourself. I think it's usually introduced in a way that you like get the person to see all the different ways that they have negative thought patterns or distorted thought patterns, and just for them to see it, and that can be a little shocking for them, or can kind of, I think it also kind of like, I don't know if you had this feeling, but it's like, wow, they understand me. I do that all the time. And like you get
Yeah.
that like feeling like, wow, I feel understood, or I feel like they know how I think.
And
um
I think like people seeing something written on a piece of paper or you bring this up to someone makes them feel understood and makes them
yeah,
feel kind of seen and not they I know when I look at them and I say, "Oh yeah, yeah, that's me too." It's like it makes me feel not as alone, you know?
yeah. Oh, I could almost like, I could do yours actually.
No, you could?
Oh yeah, you couldn't do mine, could you?
I think I probably could. When we get to it, I'll probably if I
All
hear one
right.
that really like,
All
strikes
right.
me to you, I'll be
I definitely know a few that would be yours. And it's cool because like I feel like this is also universal to age groups. I mean, I wouldn't use it with like 5-year-olds, but I
mm,
have like some teenagers that I use this with, and they actually kind of like it because teens these days love labels. So when you label something, they gives them that thing to refer back to later. Like I have this one, I think he's like 14 or 15, and he'll say like, oh, I was doing that, whatever kind of thinking it was. He'll like actually say the label of it. He'd be like, oh, I was doing that again. So, and then we'll talk about how we reframe. the thought to make it less impactful. So it's kind of cool when people actually like buy into it and they utilize the terminology.
Yeah, like my cognitive distortions are killing me today. Like, you know, something like that.
I'm trying to remember which one he was always he like refers to. Oh, you know what? A lot of my patients will say like, "Oh, I was doing that all or nothing thinking again." So
And
I
that
just
might be
love when they
the
come in and label it.
might be like almost a catch-all, I think. That would be like the only critique of mine, and we'll see as we go through this, is that I think sometimes the list of 10, and I've seen lists of 12 and 15, they can get a little redundant. Sometimes you're like, that's
Oh,
all I'm
there's a few that like, oh, I thought we already did this one.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So getting into this list, the first one is magnification and minimization. And the definition we have for this one is exaggerating or minimizing the importance of events. So one might believe their own achievements are unimportant or that their mistakes are excessively important. And a variation of that is catastrophizing, which is
Yes.
making seeing only the worst possible outcomes of a situation, like making
Making
it
a mountain
seem.
out of a molehill, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it's really
Did you
we're
say a
talking about.
mohill?
Mole.
Oh, okay. I think you said a mohill.
Nope, not a mole. So, you know, what's for me in this one that I see quite a bit is people will discount the positive. And catastrophizing also is something that we're seeing, I think, a lot of after the election, right? Where it's like
Oh yeah.
people, I'm hearing a lot of people saying like, well, you know, this is going to happen and this is going to happen and this is going to happen and it's basically over. And it's like, well, let's hold on. Let's see what happens. You'll get through this and hopefully not much will change
Yeah.
just as last time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
So,
mean, there's some general topics that I think people are like rightfully upset about,
sure.
especially, but then there's other things that I'm like, I don't know that that's going to be the outcome we're going to see here. So why don't we just like wait and see how that goes? Um, yeah. Minimization, it might be that kid that gets really good grades, but yet they're like struggling in one course and they just
Mhm.
that's all they tend to talk about is the one area where they're struggling. Um, Someone
Well,
who does
I
really
mean,
well in sports and just like, that one time they didn't do well, they can't get that out of their head and they never that's all they focus on is like the failure that they had or something like that.
I mean, you talk to, you know, 8 people in one day and you're trying to help, you're trying your best to help them all in, you know, any way you can. And one of them you just couldn't reach, you just couldn't get the words right, you just couldn't find your way. And then that's the one you remember. You're
Yeah.
like, damn, I was off today. That's what you say to yourself. You might have had, and I'll show people like the times table, like, you know, say like 7 times 1, 7 times 2, 7 times 3, all the way down to 7 times 10. And like 7 times 3 will be like I'll write like 20 or something, and you'll they'll go right to that almost every single time. They'll be like, "You got 7 times 3 wrong," and it's like, "Well, you didn't mention that I got the other 9 right." And I
Right.
always I notice that in people like we do sort of discount the positive all the time, and that stings.
I got a good example of this. So this one individual that I talked to, he he's young. He's in his like mid 20s, and he's been taking care of his mom because his mom's been poor health for years now. He literally like has to stay with her all the time. He plans everything out. He goes with her everywhere. Um, and he will constantly talk about running into old friends from school and seeing their successes and feeling like he's a failure. He hasn't done much
Hmm.
with his life. And the whole time he like describes his failures, he neglects to also explain all the responsibilities he's had that those individuals have not had to. And, sometimes I'll have to just remind him of like, think about all the responsibility. Think about all that you've had on your plate over the past few years. You've had no opportunity to go out and, you know, do these things that your peers have. Like how many people at like 25 years old are fully responsible of taking care of their moms? And then his dad too. His dad's not great in great health too, and his dad moved in, and he's kind of there taking care of both of them. Like, how
Right.
many 25-year-olds are doing that? So, again, it's kind of like minimizing what he's doing, or, you know, he's putting his own status down because he's comparing himself to other people of his age and not kind of reminding himself that his scenario is different. I guess
Absolutely.
comparison is a big part of the minimization as well.
Comparison is the thief of joy. So,
I
and
thought
that's
that was I thought that was you.
oh, dude. No, and it's not even my quote. It's Teddy Roosevelt.
Of
But
course it's not.
yeah, the thing is, that's you talked about Instagram. That's true. Comparison is the thief of joy. You start comparing yourself to other people's lives. Eek. So let's get on to the next one here. And this is kind of similar to one we're going to talk about, but overgeneralization, right? So you making these broad interpretations from a single event. I notice it with um people dating a lot, right? Where maybe you go on a date and this person you don't really hit it off, and maybe you were a little awkward on the date, and they're like, and then the person's like, "Well, I never gonna really do well with dates because I'm awkward." Because you were
Mm.
awkward in that one scenario, you're awkward forever.
Yep.
Or because that person really didn't get your vibe or didn't really like you, you guys didn't really match. I'm unlikable. It's just this thing of in one if you were awkward in one little scenario, that doesn't mean you're awkward all the time in every day of your life. So, I mean, I think that's kind of something that we definitely all do. And, before we move on real quick, I mean, just to bring this up on a personal note, you know, our friend Jack, my son, is going through like I think what, you know, seems to me a potential breakup with his like first real girlfriend. And so he's seeing like every little text, every little interaction is becoming very like, well, what did this mean? Well, what did that mean? Well, what did this mean? And it's like all
Ooh.
these cognitive distortions.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say he's probably tapping into some other things here too.
Oh, absolutely. Dude, he's running off 10 off the charts
You
right
know
now.
what's wild? Do you have a lot of people who read their text messages to you in session?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's that's like the greatest example
Perfect.
of cognitive distortions because when you hear someone read through their text messages to tell you about a situation that or an interaction that played out, sometimes you hear it and you're like, I don't think I got that from
Yeah.
what you just read.
Or they'll say it with a certain tone, and it's like,
I'm
you're
like, now
sure that's the tone?
try it in a different tone.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yes. Make it a little more sing-songy and see how it feels.
Right. So that is great. And I love that because what better way to like really have like a direct,
These are words.
conversation about it. Yeah, yeah.
The
These are
words
like
written down. Yeah.
this is a great way to talk about it because this is something that actually played out and you have the written evidence of how it played out and we can process that and kind of help see that maybe there's a different side to this.
Yeah, and
Um
Dave, we're both English,
yeah,
majors early on. And that's the beauty of English. You can't really get things wrong because you read a novel in a class and then you just listen to everyone's interpretation because everyone else is getting something different,
yeah.
right? And that's what's going on here. And we're trying to
So
like let's lean towards the positive maybe a little bit if we can.
yes, absolutely. I was just having another thought about how sometimes it can be very much the contrary too. But that's a totally different episode. Like when
Yeah.
people gloss over things that it's like, wait a minute, you didn't catch that part? But yeah, that's a little different. That's actually maybe blinding yourself to
Yeah,
something
yeah,
else
yeah, yeah, yeah.
sometimes. So here's an interesting one. Magical thinking.
Oh,
So it's belief that something that I did is going to directly influence an completely unrelated situation. I guess it's in a way, it's kind of like that. Um, if you say like, "Oh, I hope it doesn't rain," and then someone's like, "Why would you even say that?" and then it
yeah, 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 yeah.
rains, as if
Yeah.
like me saying that had like impact on the rain. But we're talking about obviously things that like I would do and then somehow blame it to on something else. So you often hear this with like relationships or like even like parental relationships. Like, oh, if only I did this, then my mom would have been happier when I was growing up or something like that. If only I wasn't such a bad kid or I didn't, give her so much grief. Maybe she wouldn't have had the health issues that she had or something like that.
Yeah, and I almost think. of OCD when I hear this one too, where a lot of people will be like, if I don't, like flick the light switch 3 times, then something might happen to my family or something like that. That's
Wow, did you just change OCD to the diagnosis name to magical thinking?
you're just
you
magical thinking. And
you
you know what? That
specialize
sounds
in
better.
anxiety and magical thinking
Yeah.
disorder.
Like someone's like, I think I have OCD. And I'm like, well, maybe you're magic. And that's way better.
Did you ever think about that maybe you had magical thinking disorder instead?
Yeah. Hello, I'm the professional here. So
MTD. You just that's awesome. I love
So here's
that.
the next one, personalization. And this is very similar, I think. It's the belief that one is responsible for events outside of their own control. So I like to think about this in the way of like the just world fallacy, where people are like, if I behave a certain way all my life, then these bad things shouldn't be allowed to happen to me. And that's, you know, that can get you into trouble.
I was actually going to, that what you just said just reminded me of, I was like off air, I was going to tell you about an episode idea based on a book that I had read because I read books once in a while.
Wow.
Yeah, no big whoop. But have you ever heard of the book? Um, Why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad things happen to good people?
No, I haven't. But
Okay.
I think I know what it's about.
Well, it's actually like a book about religion and like God's existence and stuff like that. And that whole question of like, if God exists, why can bad things happen to good people? All that stuff. Isn't that kind of like personalization in a way, though?
Absolutely.
That general thought that if I'm good, then nothing should happen to me. So if obviously I'm not good, if something bad happened to me, or
Well, I think
something,
if nothing bad happens to you, you never have the opportunity to be good. I think, you know what I mean?
I guess.
Is that making any sense? Like I really do, and we talked
I don't think
about,
they're correlated, right?
well,
Being good and bad things happening, being good and bad or
they're
good things
really
happening.
not. No, they're really not.
I
But
mean,
I think
there's
that
natural
it,
consequences that are going to happen with any action, and we take the risk when we do any action, right?
yeah.
But like, yeah. So I guess with this one, with personalization, I hear this one a lot. It's this idea that like that someone's so the same kid I was telling you that like will come back and tell me about cognitive
Yeah.
distortions. He's been doing this thing with he's just starting to date and he's got a tinge of magical thinking disorder and he will he's been texting this girl and it was going really well and then she kind of asked him for space and he doesn't understand why because he's like it was going so well
Yeah.
and it's been such a short period of time and basically she's been saying things like this timing is kind of bad right now, but like I, definitely want to explore things in the future. But just it sounds like there's something going on in her life. And he keeps saying, like, maybe she hates me and that's why she's saying this, or,
Sure.
I must have done something so stupid that like she can't like she doesn't want to talk to me anymore. I'm like, that's not what she said at all, actually. And like,
Yeah.
I actually think if we look at what she's said to you so far, she's given you all the answers. I just think they're really hard answers to process because we want like a more tangible answer. Like, what is
Well,
going on in your life? Tell me
right,
right now. And
right,
she's not
right.
sharing that,
The other thing too is though, maybe he might be picking up on something like that he doesn't want to acknowledge, right? And maybe he's looking for you for reassurance. But I, and I could be on an island here, but I think if someone asks for space, it's
Yeah,
trouble.
but so I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But this is something that was like short, young. I mean, you're young, but he even found some evidence. Like she's literally told him, like, I have basically alluded to, like, there's stuff going on
Mm.
that like I got to focus on right now, and I really can't. I don't think it's fair to you because yeah, I need to focus on those things. So right now isn't good, but I'd like to continue talking in the future.
Then he's going
And
to give
then
space.
he saw a social media post that she made about, hey, do you believe in finding the right person at the wrong time? And I'm like,
Ooh,
dude,
that's a
this
great
dude,
sign.
And these two things like are your proof. Well, like,
Yeah.
why are you thinking she hates? He actually said like maybe she hates me, and then this and this is why. And I'm like, she at no point said she hates you, so we got to slow
Yeah.
the train down a
This
little
might
bit.
be the one case where somebody asking for space is okay. Because now from now on, if someone asks tells me that their partner asked for space out of them, and I say I would ask them if they made a comment on social media like that, like some kind of
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
hey,
Check the
maybe I'll
social
find the right
media.
person at the wrong time. And if that's not there, move on.
See
But
what I'm afraid is happening is he's overthinking it so much. He's going to do something that is going to cause her to be like, all right, forget it.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm like really trying to help him reframe his thoughts here. All
So
right.
it's like you don't want to get in the weeds with your thoughts. So if
Yeah,
someone asks for space, just gotta give them space.
you just got
No
to.
matter,
You
you
just
just
got to.
got it.
And if it
Yeah.
happens, it happens. If, if they come back, that's why I said to him, I was like, just make her miss you, dude.
That's
Make her
it.
miss
That's
you.
the move. How's she gonna miss you if you're there?
That's what
Ask
I
him.
said. I was like, if you keep talking to her friend and her friend talks to her, or if you check in with her and just say, hey, how you doing? She's not going to ever get a chance to say, you know what? I totally miss him
Yeah.
and I want to reach out to him.
Yeah.
She
Too much
needs to
space. She may say
have
that.
exactly. You know what we neglected to do as we've been doing this? It might be also helpful for us to talk about or like just directly say how people can reframe. I think we've alluded to how like the way people can reframe each of these distortions,
Hmm.
but we got to just make sure we touch on that.
Okay.
So with the personalization, I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. Like a big one for me is like let's find evidence to what is being said to you or what makes you believe that you have some direct impact on this situation so it's your fault,
Hmm.
and a lot of the times they won't be able to provide that evidence, or they'll provide evidence that points to the contrary.
And then if they can find evidence for the way they are feeling, which they probably can, even if it's not good evidence, if you challenge them to also find evidence to the contrary, I think is what like you're saying. That's the
Yeah.
important thing, right?
Yep.
Find evidence both ways, right? And then let's talk about the worst case scenario. Let's talk about the best case scenario, and then like the most likely
Yeah.
is scenario, right?
the
I mean, that's
the biggest thing with personalization is it is easier to blame ourselves or assume that we have some responsibility than it is to be able to settle on, I don't understand why this happened, or I
hmm
don't know the answer to this. So we naturally point the blame back to ourselves. And that's just human nature, I think. In some ways, it's our instinct a little bit. When we don't have an answer, we assume we have some. So it's like when you can just remind yourself, like, this is why I'm doing it, and I have no real reason to actually believe that to be true. It can be helpful to reframe and then like come up with another thought. And
because
maybe
I
that
think
thought is like, I just don't know the answer to it.
it is a comforting thought though to think that like the way you behave it like returns to you, or even if people who kind of wrong you, that like sort of behavior will come back to get them. Like it's like a whole karma thing, right? Where
Yeah,
it's like there is some comfort to that.
a
Um,
lot of times though people
yeah.
are utilizing it. So I do a lot of or I used to do a lot of personalization. I've done a lot of work with like trying to, you know, stop doing that or at least limit or remind myself when I am. The biggest thing though is it's usually you put yourself down. It's
Mhm.
like it's just because I'm a piece of shit, or it's like just because like I just I'm not good, or I'm boring, and that's why they don't want to talk to me anymore, and that's why they don't call me anymore. And little do we think to like actually find the reason. That's the other thing is sometimes people it's a lack of communication. So another reason why people might personalize is it's easier to just blame yourself and assume that you're the problem than actually initiate that conversation and say, hey, this is what happened, this is how it made me feel. Can you provide some explanation on your end of like what exactly took place here so I can better understand the situation?
Absolutely. And to kind of continue on with well, I was gonna do jump to conclusions, but I think that we all kind of understand jumping to conclusions, right? So like just basically interpreting the meaning of a situation with no evidence. So that's the biggest problem with cognitive distortions is deciding that someone feels a certain way or decide that someone is behaving a certain way based on no evidence at all. It's essentially what it
Yeah. And
Um,
there's two different variations of jumping to conclusions, right?
yeah, let's talk about them. So my favorite is mind reading because I we all kind of think we can do it. We really do. Um, so this is just interpreting the thoughts and beliefs others without adequate evidence, and that happens to people all the time.
You're a mind
Yeah.
reader.
Uh, am I a mind reader? You think this is mine?
That's one of them.
Hit me with it though. I want to know why.
Why?
Yeah.
Um, I think actually no, jumping to conclusions, I would say. Maybe
Okay.
not mind reading, because I don't think you always think it's something that's your fault, but I think that you're the next one is fortune telling, which
Yeah.
same thing, but kind of predicting the worst. Actually, yeah, you're more fortune telling probably than mind reader.
Okay. Do you have it? You must have some kind of example in
No,
mind.
dude, just observations. That's all
I'm.
we do.
Why do you hate me? My magical thinking is telling me you hate me, and I don't like it, and now I'm uncomfortable and angry. But it's when someone, we keep it in a date.
I do have a pretty good reason. I just don't want to say it on air.
Why is it bad?
No, it has to do with our job.
Oh, okay. Um, you'll have to tell me off air if I
Yeah.
remember. So you ask someone on a date, Dave, and they literally tell you the truth. Like, oh, no, I'm kind of like, just getting out of something, or, things
That's
are
what
really busy.
that's what they always say when they
Yeah.
hate me.
Right. Or I'm just ugly, or
Oh, all right, cool. I look like butt. Thanks.
yeah, yeah. That's, you know what I mean? Like you literally hear what they say and you say, "Oh yes, yeah, no, I know. I know. I am kind of a loser with a dead end job and like, you know what I mean? Like whatever." Like all like the biggest fears about yourself kind of like rise, bubble right up into your head and like that it's almost like what do I not want them to be think about me and then you assume that that's what they're thinking about you.
And I think I don't know about for you, but like a lot of them will be like you'll relate it back to that like something that bothered you about yourself or something that maybe someone said one time and you're just like you draw it on all those insecurities, right? So
And
you're like,
it's when it matters too. So it's like this is probably someone you want to like you.
yeah,
And now that you've like sort of are using the distortions of mind reading and fortune telling, you're interpreting like their actions and their words incorrectly. So you're mad at them. And now you're not going to treat them the same way that you normally would, and you're going to create distance instead of bringing you closer just because of this the way you were thinking was completely wrong
right.
and it's doing the opposite of what you want. So it's almost like you have this choice where it's like, is this getting me closer to what I want or further away? And
Yeah.
that's kind of a good way to get through it.
See, but this is the like what you said at the beginning about some of these kind of being redundant. This
Mm,
is where like personalization is very closely related to mind reading in some
sure.
ways. All like most of these, if it comes back to something interpersonal, like about relationships, it's all about basically like lack of communication.
It is really, and you're right. There's a redundancy here because like it's like what mind reading, fortune telling, and then what's next? Like crystal balling and tarot
Yeah.
carding. Like what's? I mean, it's all kind of the same kind of thing.
Magical thinking.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So let's hit the next one because I think this one's something we all do, and it's no fault of our own. I think this is very biological.
Yeah. So we have emotional reasoning.
Mm.
So feeling like something is the way it is because of a way that like you are or something about you innately, I guess.
Well,
Like
even
or how
like
you feel.
you ever wake up in the morning and you feel anxious, or of course, right? Or you feel kind of down. And you don't just go like, "Oh, that's weird that I feel that way." You've tried to find a reason why you feel that way. And then you're like, "Oh, it must be because of, like I'm struggling at work a little bit, or I got this thing coming up today. I didn't even realize how nervous I was about it." But it's like you can feel anxious and you can feel depressed. You can feel all these things without having to dig in and find the absolute reason why. You can kind of like do the opposite and be like, "Oh, I'm feeling kind of down, like how can I like what can I do to change that mood? Like what can I do to get out of this?" Instead of like how do I dig in more on it and like find the reason, and it just kind of keeps me there.
So like if I'm having like a day where I'm just like not in a good mood
Yeah,
and then
clouds
something
following you around.
something happens, like either like maybe I leave a little late, I'm
Mhm.
rushing, I drop something, whatever. The first thought that comes to my head is like, oh. the whole day is going to be like this.
Hmm.
Everything that I always say this to myself, everything that could go wrong is going to go wrong today. I just know it.
Yeah. And which is catastrophizing because
Yeah.
if you're saying that, you're like, oh, you're gonna get like murdered today because that would be on the list of.
And then I minimize because along the way some things
Mhm.
go right or
Right?
some things go as planned,
Discounting the positive
and
along the way.
I don't bother looking at those. Yeah. So a bunch of distortions are happening in that process.
Yeah. So what's
Relationships. This is like a big one for relationships too, because there's when you have, especially if like in couples therapy, if you have one person who does emotional reasoning and the other one who's more of like that rational minded,
yeah.
maybe too rational minded, you're gonna have some conflict there,
Oh, and yeah, that's a
some
huge
mis.
conflict in relationships too, where it's like, you know, someone will say something like, you feel this way about me, and it's like, oh, you can't tell me how I feel about you. Like that's, that you're putting, your thoughts on how you think I feel about you in my head. I see that all the time where people decide how someone else feels about them, and it makes them feel really bad,
And if
and
and if everything is happening based on how you're feeling, and that other person is going to try to fix something for you,
mhm.
nothing they're going to fix is going to change how you feel, so you're always going to have this conflict because they just don't understand you, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, and then there's a whole science to this where I don't know if we ever talked about the blue dot effect, Dave. Did we?
Nope.
Well, it's this thing where they did this study at Harvard, and they put a bunch of blue dots on a screen, and there was varying colors, purples and whatever, and there was like the tons of dots, but like only some of them are like blue. And they would ask all the people, how many blue dots do you see? And they would see 10 because that's how many there were. And then they would go back behind the scenes and they would change the color slightly. And so there would be about maybe 7 or 6 blue dots now. But they would ask the people again and they would still all see 10. And they would do this over and over again until there was essentially no blue dots. And then people were still seeing 10. And the point I'm trying to make here is our brains are designed to see what they're looking for. Like so,
Right.
like if we like we want a goal or something. That's what's great about us. If we have like a goal or something, then we see the path to it. We can make it happen, and we can actively work towards that. But if we're seeing the world as like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop, and we're always seeing what's negative. If we're looking for the negative, we're certainly gonna find it, and that's like
Yes.
literally just how our brains are designed.
Yes. Speaking of that,
Yeah.
our next one.
Okay.
So we kind of just alluded to this one. We have disqualifying the positive.
Hmm.
Um,
I wrote that.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, this one is super common. It's definitely something that I talk to people quite frequently about.
Hmm.
Um, you have 7 things go correct, one thing go incorrect, and that's all you can think about is that one thing that went wrong. You think about all the failures and none of the successes, and it just gets you caught up. You just
It
feel
does.
you just never can appreciate where you're at if you're constantly thinking about that.
There's this comedian that I listen to. And he was talking about how when he's on the stage and everyone in the crowd is laughing and it's like it feels so good. But then he'll like see someone like either get up and go to the bathroom or someone with their like falling asleep or their arms crossed. And he won't think about like what's going on in their lives. Maybe they just got broken up with. Maybe they got their own things going on. But he just in a sea of laughter, he will see that one person with their arms crossed and be like, what am I doing wrong here? Like what's going on?
Hmm.
And that's what we're talking about
Who
here.
is that?
Sebastian Maniscalco.
I knew that.
Yeah.
I knew you were gonna say that.
I love him. It's pretty good. And then we have what David Burns would hilariously call should statements, and he would say, "Don't should yourself." And that's the belief that things should be a certain way.
Yeah.
And if you're saying that, I should always be good, I should always be on time, I should always be, friendly, whatever it is, then whenever you're like slightly off, then you're gonna feel like crap about yourself. So you shouldn't really be doing that. Um, And it's almost like that Aristotle quote where he says, "You are what you repeatedly do." That means that you are like the good things that you do most of the time. That doesn't mean that he's not saying you are what you always do 100% of the time. It's like you are what you repeatedly do. So like the decisions that you try to make most of the time. Like if you have a diet, if as long as you're good on it like 80, 90% of the time, you're okay. You don't need to be 100% all the time.
It's
That's
funny
kind
because like almost every scenario we give almost connects to like another distortion that we're going to get into, because that one's an example I would give for the next one too. With should statements, this one I definitely found myself being guilty of quite
of.
frequently until we learned about it, and then I worked on that a little bit. But and I'll always tell people now, like, there is no such thing as should. It's either you will, you won't, you did, you didn't,
Hmm.
and then you move on. You have to have acceptance of that. The should is that regret. It's
Yeah.
that just clinging to the things that I should have done it this way. I should have done it that way. I should have said this. I should have said that. You didn't though. And guess what? There's nothing you can do to change that at this point, except for think about what you can do now to move forward that will improve your situation, or just move past whatever it was. But thinking about the shoulds is just clinging to regret.
That's a great sort of word to use, regret. I appreciate using that because if you ever read that book Tuesdays with Morrie, there's a time where he talks about like this guy's like, "Hey, do you ever like regret the things that you wish you had done, or you didn't ask that girl, or you didn't take that dance, or whatever it was?" And then the guy, he's dying, right? He's, months away from dying and he knows it. And he's like, "I don't regret anything. Why would I do that? Like, why would I spend my time in regret? It's like I did what I did and my life needs to move forward, right? I mean, that's not to say that like, if you do something heinous, you shouldn't regret it,
Yeah,
but I mean, if you live your life the best you can and you made some mistakes here and there, like why would you ever dwell on that? Like I am where I am and things are okay.
yeah.
Things are okay.
I,
And
I
then
just have a quick one to share about
yeah,
that.
go ahead.
So I worked with this guy who was an ex addict, and he was getting very, very paranoid over time. This is completely sober.
Mhm.
Had a lot of stuff going on, a lot of health issues. His anxiety was through the roof. He would constantly say, like, if I knew sobriety was going to feel this terrible, I never would have got sober. But he had no, like, he would say it kind of like with a smirk on his face, because he never had any intention to go back. Um, but his paranoia was like really getting to him. And then one day he shares with me all these like really not great things he did while he was using. And I'm talking about like, I was like, wow, all right, no wonder why you're paranoid. Like, I was like, you must feel this stuff must be just weighing you down, like the way you feel about this stuff. He goes, I don't care. He's like, I'm just afraid one of these people is gonna come back and shoot me one day. But I was like, wow, all right.
Yeah, that's
It just
different.
kind of threw me for a loop, because I was like thinking, here I was thinking he was like kind of confessing these things and
Yeah.
like telling me this in like a way like I need to get this off my chest. He was more sharing him like anecdotally, and like I sort of appreciated that view, because it was like, damn, like, I mean, I'm not gonna say like that I want to have no regret over
Yeah.
things that I feel like are worthy of regret. But like the fact that he can sit there and just say, like, no, it's in the past. It's like, and I was like, you know what? You're right. Like, why beat yourself up constantly over things that are like ages ago, a different version of yourself ago? There's so much time to continue to grow as a person, and hopefully, improve, and, try to do your best, and, hopefully make up for it in some other way.
Well, yeah, I think that's part. I think you have to do that though. I
Yeah.
mean, depending on like the level, I'm sure there's like a hierarchy of regret, right? I
There's a
mean,
couple of things he said there that I would
yeah.
have probably
Or,
regretted.
well, because look, that's what that whole book, like Dostoevsky, which is probably the most important like writer ever. I mean, Crime and Punishment is
I
about
love
that.
Crime and Punishment. Yeah.
Yeah, like you know what I mean? Like you may have had your reasons to do something horrible, and it may have made sense, and it may have been, I don't know, you could have justified it at the time. But when you do something really bad, you do change.
Yeah. I'm still not convinced that he doesn't have some regret, and that he's like
Yeah.
confusing it with something else. Like, I mean, he was.
well, yeah, like maybe
If you're
that's his
worried that
way
people
of
are going to come and shoot you over things you've done
that's a
in your
regret,
past,
right?
that's kind of
That's the
regret.
regret. Yeah, that's a regret in and of itself. Yeah. Boy, I wish these people weren't coming to shoot me. But
So the
the
last
king of
one
all, yeah, the king. Go ahead, lay it on us, Davis. This is the king.
this is my favorite one. Yeah.
Feeling when you need, I think.
Yeah. All or nothing thinking. So the thought process that things have to be all one way, all
Mhm.
done positively, perfectly, or it's failure, or it's done. There's no point in doing it anymore if it's not. So this impacts so many people,
Yeah.
but I find it really interesting because there is actually a whole community of people whose brains are wired for all or nothing thinking, and that's not something they can necessarily just reframe to get to go away. It's just the way they look at life, and that's people on the autism spectrum, obviously.
Yeah.
So for those of us who are not on the autism spectrum, we can still get really stuck in this pattern. And as you were mentioning, you alluded to diets in the last one. All or nothing thinking is the killer of diets because
It's the
there is
killer of my gyms too.
of gems. Yeah, anything. It's like because you go in there with this idea of like set in your mind, I'm gonna do it this many times a week, or I'm gonna like do this diet for this many days in the week. And as soon as you mess up, as soon as you have a moment of, you know, I don't know, you mess up, you what's the word I'm looking for? You just
Fail.
you fail. I know I was trying to avoid using the word fail because you don't really
Because it's
fail.
not a fail, right? No, you're right.
Nothing
No.
is a failure. Yeah.
But no, even in my own personal life, how many times have I like I had to read like this book called Tiny Habits to really kind of get this baked in. And even still it doesn't. Like I like going to the gym. It makes me feel good. But like if I can only go there for a half hour, it doesn't feel like I did it. And I probably won't because I'm like, oh, that's not worth it. And then if you do that enough times,
You
you
just never
know,
go.
you just never go. And instead of, you even if you went a half an hour every day for 4 days, that's what? Like that's 2 hours at the gym.
Yeah.
And instead of doing that, you spent 0 hours at the gym, and one's way better than the other one.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And that's based on a distortion. I mean, it's just wrong.
The
They're not
the
logical.
the way that I like to think about it is if I do 10 minutes of exercise, that's better than the last week where I did 0 minutes of exercise, right?
100%. And it's a
And
win.
and it's a win. Here's one strategy that I use with individuals, especially those on the spectrum. Um, I try to set goals of something we're going to work on through the week, but I give them a percentage of what we're trying to hit. And
Yeah.
the ultimate thing is like if they came in and they didn't hit that percentage, I'm still going to tell them that's fine. It's not, there's never a failure. We're just going to, hey, you didn't hit that 70% mark. Guess what? We're going to try harder next week.
Hmm.
We still did, we did 50% of it. Wow, that's pretty amazing. I'm really happy with 50%. But next week we're gonna strive for that 70%. We're gonna just kind of, kick it up a notch and try to get that 70%. So the whole point I'm trying to drive home to them is that like just because we didn't achieve it doesn't mean it's gone. We still are working on that goal. That Daruma, did I shared that with you?
No.
All right. So I believe it's from Japan. I hope it is because I don't want to say this incorrectly. But they have that New Year's Eve little doll that has the eyes that the pupils aren't drawn in. So they make a wish and they color in one pupil when they make in the wish. And they do this at New Year's Eve or the start of the new year for them. And then when the goal is hit, that's when they color in the second pupil. But
Yeah.
if they don't hit that goal, what do you think they do?
They keep it for another
They
year.
keep it and they try again the next year.
I was
So
gonna say,
the
I hope they
idea
don't have
is
a
you just
pile of one-eyed dolls because that's
no,
freaky.
no, you just don't give up on the goal. You
Yeah.
work harder and you continue to try to work on, and that's the whole point of it is to like drive home that idea that you don't just give up on your goals. You keep
No,
working
that's
until they happen.
and like that back to the gym thing, it's pretty it doesn't sound as irrational like, oh, if I don't go for an hour, it's nothing. You know what I mean? That's an irrational thing to say. So it's like what you're saying is like, even if you made it ridiculous, like if I work out for 2 minutes, it's a win today.
Yeah.
that will get you going though, because it's like, even if, say you literally only have 2 minutes, which is kind of ridiculous, but that's all you have. That's all you have to do. And you won, you worked out that day, you met your goal. But how many, I bet you, 9 times out of 10, you'll get down for 2 minutes. And then next thing you know, you've been working out for 10 minutes, 15 minutes,
Yep.
whatever, right? It just, the act of, making these tasks small enough where like you'll get started, you'll do them and take the willpower and everything out of the equation.
Here's another example of something that gives a lot of people issue with all or nothing thinking, like cleaning. So if it's
Mm,
cleaning your house, cleaning a room, organizing an area, um, it gets to a point.
cleaning your
It,
body.
cleaning your butt, sure, I guess. Not really what I was thinking, but it gets to a point where they've let it go for so long that it's so overwhelming, and they're like, I don't think I can do any of it because I'm never going to get this done today. You ever hear people say that? I'm never going to be able to get this done in one
Of
day, so I
course.
just can't
Yeah.
get myself to do it. Well, if you can't get it done in one day, how much can you get done today? Let's set a goal. Break it down. Let's break it down into different steps. How much of that do you want to get done today, and to be able to feel like you accomplished something? And guess what? If you break it up and you set small goals, there might be a chance that hey, you finish this today and you still have time to do some more, so you get double of what you
Right.
plan to get done, and that's going to feel great.
It's also
So
important to do that for people too, because I've had, this is someone that I've been talking to recently where like he is, like he has one of those jobs where like you get like laid off during this, like the winter, and
yeah,
then, whatever. It's not kind of like a cycle. But it's like he has so many things he wants to get done in the house. And he's like, I feel like I'm just doing nothing all day. And my wife's looking at me thinking, you're doing nothing. Tons of cognitive distortions going on here. And, I'm like, well, if you don't have like a goal of what you want to get done in the day, then even if you've done a bunch of things, you're gonna be like, was that enough? You know what I
right,
mean?
right,
So if you have this like idea of what you could get done, you could be like, oh man, I almost reached that, or oh man, I got all that done today. Instead of being like, that did I even do anything? I mean, I got this done, that done, and that done. And if you had said, I got this, I want to do this, this, and this, then you'd feel good about it. But instead, you'd feel sort of about it because you didn't really have a goal
yeah,
to meet.
yep,
And working towards that goal, as we know, is an important thing.
yeah. So that's our list.
The list.
That is our list.
CDs.
See, I was like, what are you talking about? Yes, CDs, cognitive distortions.
Yep. So
There
the
was
kids.
something we talked about at the beginning. I was like, oh, I want to come back to that. Oh, I now I remember. All right, this is totally not related to cognitive distortion. So if you guys have questions about cognitive distortions, hit us up.
Mhm.
Oh, just so everyone's familiar, or if you want to access the list that we read off of today of the distortions with the specific wording, because you might find some lists that have like different wording for the phrases themselves or
Even
the
different names. Yeah, like
different
whatever.
names. That's what I was trying to say. So we got ours off of Therapist Aid, which is a site that I think we utilize kind of frequently. So that cognitive distortions list is from there. If you guys want to print out your own or utilize this at work, feel free. But something I figured we could talk about on air, just because I know sometimes we like to, you know, share some personal stuff about our
Sure.
work life and stuff like that. We were talking about graduating people, and I thought that was a funny conversation because I was sharing with Greg that we have a coworker who graduated somebody and was kind of talking about that a little bit. And then I thought about it, I was like, I've never graduated a patient. And you said, Greg, that you haven't either.
I know. And I was like, are we doing this wrong?
And I guess like this is a little vulnerable for us because like there might be people who strongly feel like you're supposed to. Um, but like one of the things that we've said is like I'm not, we've been saying this forever. Like we're not in this for some like short duration thing. Like I kind of feel like therapy is helpful to people regardless, like of if you're in crisis or you're not. Some people need the space, and I tend to have a lot of patients who utilize the space as like their safe area to talk about whatever it is they need to talk about. And they, over time, I guess that's more of it. It's like they might come in crisis, but then over time they just find it to be a helpful space to help them work through things, and they utilize it that way. So it's like they might space themselves out, like from going like weekly to
Yeah,
biweekly to
that's for sure.
monthly.
Like a space out is something that happens. But no, look, I mean, how invaluable to have somewhere to go where it's just about you and you don't have to worry about someone needing space after a few minutes, right? I
Yeah,
mean, because that's basically what we're providing, right? Like that sounding board where you can kind of be like, this is how I feel about this. Is this, how, what are your thoughts? Or like it's,
yeah.
man, that's just feels good.
And if they actually go through something in the future, they know where they can go to
Hmm.
talk about it if they need to. So I don't know. I there's no real point to this other than
No,
just
look, I get it.
I wanted to hear if like any listeners or or watchers are have thoughts about this. I would love to hear some opinions about it. You know, what do you feel about it? Do you feel like it's I don't know. Do you feel like we're doing something wrong by not setting a graduation for somebody from therapy?
Hmm.
Do you need to graduate from therapy in order to be able to utilize therapy? What are people's thoughts? Just wanted to kind of
I would
open up
love to
that
know people's
dialogue.
thoughts on that too. I really
Yeah,
would actually.
yeah. So feel free to hit us up on either social media or email or whatever to let us know. utgnpodcast@gmail.com if you want to email us. Otherwise, it's unconventional therapists on all the social medias. But yeah, yeah.
Let us know.
Greg, we missed a fan mail, and I
We did.
blame you
That's not me. I guess.
because I feel like it was read by one of us, and then that message didn't get relayed. So I'm
You're
going to make
assuming
an
that
assumption
that's got
it
to be
was you.
me.
I'm going to make a cognitive distortion that it was you.
I
Um,
should be reading them all.
we should be reading them all,
We
Greg.
should.
No, we usually get an alert when we get them, and there was no, I didn't see an alert, and you usually share them. So that's why
Yeah,
I
but
say this.
yeah.
I'm not just being rude to you. All right. So this was on October 30th from someone in Missouri. Thank you for being awesome. I could
Hmm.
say so much. You guys especially do help me through my darker days. I don't know who this is, but I wish I did. I really wish I did. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to say thank you for that statement. I wish I knew more. Now I'm intrigued by you. And
Thank you to
yeah,
the Ozarks,
thank you to the
right?
Ozarks. The fact that you can share that us doing this can help you through darker days is all I need to hear. That is like so meaningful. So thank you for
Yeah, that's
sharing
the
that.
motivation. Like we're not worried about I mean the subscription would be nice, of course. But like just the messages and reviews and everything like that, that's everything. We get a couple people saying like, "Hey, you guys really helped me through something." Bam. Motivation.
Yeah,
And it means a ton to us. Keeps us going.
it really does. It really does. So, yeah, Greg, anything else for our listeners?
No, just, tell yourself the stories that are going to make make your life better. Don't tell yourself the stories that are going to make you feel like crap.
Mhm.
Tell yourself the right stories, I guess is what I'm saying. Look through
Okay.
the right Instagram filter. And I'll tell you, the right one isn't the one that gives you the puppy dog ears and everything. Is that still a thing people do?
Yeah,
That's a shame.
that's a shame. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. As always, we will see you next week. If you get a chance, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show. Please feel free to leave a rating and review. Reviews are mainly done on Apple Podcasts, but if you listen from another device, feel free to leave a rating on there. Otherwise, we will see you next week. Have a good one. Talk to you later. Good
Bye.
night.
Good night.
Goodbye.